We're going to have a conversation now, actually a couple of presentations and a conversation at the global view, looking at where the energy world is going, not necessarily at the technology level that Rob Bernard was talking about at Microsoft, but I think at the more of the systems level, national policy, and where this is taking us and where the challenges, where the opportunities are. So to have that conversation, please join me in welcoming from the Rocky Mountain Institute, we know him and love him, Amory Lovins, and from the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, Rainer Baake. Please join us.
Thanks.
Hi, Joe.
There. So Rainer's going to do a little presentation. You can just don't even sit, just get in. Oh, you don't even need that, right? To get into that. And then followed by Amory, and we'll have a little conversation along the way. So take it away, Rainer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. Good morning, everybody. As you all know, after many years of failures, we finally reached a global deal on climate last year in Paris. And one of the major reasons why this was actually possible was that the climate scientists had made very clear to us that we still have a budget that is smaller than 1,000 gigatons of CO2 in form of oil, coal, and gas. And if we would exceed the emissions over these 1,000 gigatons of CO2 in the next decades, we would experience a dangerous climate change. And it became very clear that if we would continue the global annual emissions at the same level as we have them today, this budget would be used up in less than 30 years. So the idea behind the Paris Agreement is lower the annual emissions of CO2 as soon as possible, bend the curve, and thereby stretch the budget, and then during the course of the century move over to a carbon-free world economy. And it was agreed in Paris that the industrial countries will take the lead. And that's why a country like my country, Germany, has already decided quite a few years ago that we want to decarbonize our economy by 2050. Now, decarbonization, of course, has to address all the major sectors, the power sector, the transportation sector, the housing sector. And the answers in these sectors is going to be always the same. It's first about efficiency. Without a real increase in energy efficiency, we're not going to meet these targets of decarbonization. Then we need to use renewable sources within these sectors as much as possible. In the power sector, it will probably be a transformation to 100% renewables. In the transport sector and the housing sector, direct use of renewables is limited, possible, but it's limited. At the end, we are most likely going to see sector coupling. That means we're going to use carbon-free electricity for the decarbonization of the transport sector and the housing sector. To make it more specific, in the long run, we're going to use electricity to drive cars, and after increasing the efficiency in houses and after abolishing heater system with fossil fuels, we'll probably use electricity from CO2-free resources. In Germany, we have come quite a bit far when it comes to the power sector. We have a penetration now of about 33% renewables in our power sector. And we are discussing now this sector coupling, how to move in the other sectors to also carbon-free technologies. But aside from bringing new technologies into the market, we also need an exit strategy for the fossil fuels. And if we want to do this in an efficient way, we have to think in investment cycles. Investments in the power sector usually have a lifespan of 40 years. So that means very clearly, if we want to decarbonize the power sector by 2050, no more investments in coal generators, mines, and so on and so on. That's going to be stranded investments. Let's take a look at the other sectors. For example, the building sector. In my country, we build houses that have a lifespan of about 100 years. And the heating systems usually have a lifespan of about 20 years. So if we don't want to rely on fossil fuels 2050, we have to increase the building standards. We have to make sure that by 2030, there will be no heating systems in new buildings that rely on fossil fuels. Maybe the most difficult sector is going to be the transportation sector. Trains in Germany all drive with electricity, but cars, trucks, and so on, almost all rely on fossil fuels so far. So lifespans of a car in Germany is about 20 years. What does that mean? It means when we have the target not to drive with diesel and gasoline in 2050, well, by 2030, the new cars that we put on the road have to have zero emission. And that means electrification. That's good, by the way, for the people who work in the power sector, because in spite of increasing efficiency, the power sector will grow because it has to supply CO2-free energy for the transportation sector and the sector of housing and cooling. So we need, to sum it up, two things. We need the new technologies, especially also digitalization, and we need an exit strategy out of the fossil fuels. And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, this is not about saving the planet. Don't worry about the planet. I mean, what happens if we fail? What happens if we don't limit the greenhouse gases and exceed the 2-degree temperature increase and run into a situation where there is severe global warming? Glaciers are going to melt, sea levels are going to rise, deserts are going to expand. Don't worry. The planet will adjust. It's us, the 8 to 10 billion people on this planet, who cannot adjust. And that's the promise of Paris, that we will not expose future generations to dangerous climate change, and that especially means the generation of our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thanks. So, Randy, before we move on to Amory, Amory, you can sit over here with us. You know. Is it something I said earlier or no? Hopefully not. Usually is. One of the things that's happened in Germany fairly recently is that you've changed the feed-in tariff that had famously taken renewables in Germany to these incredible heights in leadership position to a kind of a bidding auction system.
Right.
And from my understanding is that's cut out a lot of the smaller users and skewed the energy mix over to some of the larger larger utilities who are able to bid on those, win those auctions. Talk a little bit about why that's being done, what the implications are, and is this controversial?
Well, first of all, when we started our support scheme for renewables in the year 2000, we wanted to take risks away from investors. And that's why we created this feed-in tariff, which is nothing else but a guaranteed price for 20 years if you feed electrons into the grid. It has been an extremely successful instrument. We moved from below 7% to around 33% of penetration of renewables in our power system. But at the very beginning, we always said, this is an instrument to lead the renewables into the market. The renewables are now the strongest source of electricity, stronger than hard coal, stronger than lignite, stronger than nuclear. So, of course, now one of the jobs that we have to do is move the renewables to the market. And that means that, and this we introduced in 2014, that if you produce electricity with a windmill or a large-scale solar panel, you have to market your product. That's normal in our economy, that you just don't put the product somewhere else and say, you're responsible for marketing my project. You are responsible for yourself to do that. And it works. We have no problems with this marketing. The second step is that we said, we need more competition. We have to step-by-step move the renewables to the market. There's no competition of renewables with nuclear or with fossil fuels. It's a competition over who needs the least support. And then, of course, the issue of variety of ownership is very much a concern of ours. Yeah. And it has been a debate because some people, change is always something that is not so nice. You're used to a certain system and change is something that you're afraid of, but we created special rules for small installation. There's something that is especially, I was very particular about the situation in Germany. About 40% of the installed capacity of renewables is in the hands of private people and farmers. And that is a big reason why this energy transition has such a strong support in Germany, because people we only feel we are part of the solution in terms of climate protection. They also earn money with it. Sure. And we want to keep it that way. So variety of ownership is a priority, and the special rules that we introduced are going to make sure that normal citizens will participate in this energy transition also in the future.
Great. Let's hear from Amory. Amory, take it away.
Thank you. In 1975, US government and industry all insisted that the energy needed to make $1 of GDP couldn't drop. A year later, I heretically suggested it could drop 72% in 50 years. So far, it's dropped 56% in 40 years. Yet, just the innovations already made by 2010 can now save another threefold, or twice what I originally thought, at a third the real cost. And now that looks conservative. For example, optimizing buildings, vehicles, and factories as whole systems can often make very big energy savings cost less than small or no savings, turning diminishing returns into expanding returns. And such integrative design is how our Empire State Building retrofit saved 38% of that building's energy with a 3-year payback, which seemed pretty good until 3 years later, our cost-effective Denver retrofit saved 70% on this government office, that's half-century old, making it more efficient than the best new US office, which in turn is only half as efficient as our own new office, net positive, no mechanicals. And yet its technologies were all available over a decade earlier. What mainly improved is not technology, but design. And both of those are moving efficiency into fast forward. Prior lighting improvements are being swept away as LEDs each decade get 30 times more efficient, 20 times brighter, 10 times cheaper, saving 1/8 of the world's electricity. They're prying open an old crack in utilities business models. You see, Thomas Edison didn't sell electricity, he sold light. So more efficient lamps would cut his costs. But in 1892, utilities switched over to selling kilowatt hours, so customer efficiency cuts their revenues. Utilities sell a commodity, not an infrastructure or a service that customers want, like hot showers and cold beer. By the way, what else changes this fast? LEDs inside out are PVs. In the past 5 years, photovoltaics meteorite strike has made solar power cost less than power plants' fossil fuels. The dashed line, by the way, the top blue line is the progress of the feed-in tariff in Germany, which has about a Seattle climate. Wind power, the lower aqua curve, is often making old gas, coal, and nuclear plants uneconomic to run. And actually, powerful disruptors are converging on the electricity industry from at least 8 directions. These 8 Pac-Men of the apocalypse move fast. They don't just add, they exponentiate. They're not lone wolves. They hunt in packs. They multiply quickly, and they can gobble half of utility revenues by the 2020s. Together, they are creating an alien competitive landscape faster than most utility cultures can cope. 2 years ago, all central power plants were called dinosaurs. Too big, too inflexible, not even relevant for backup power in the long run. Who said that? It wasn't Greenpeace. It was Union Bank of Switzerland. U.S. wholesale electricity prices have been widely undercut by the average fixed price contracts for wind power and for solar power. And even without their temporary subsidies, generally smaller than the permanent ones to non-renewables, unsubsidized wind and solar at 3 cents a kilowatt hour are now winning in global markets. Renewable costs keep falling. In the past 7 years, taller towers and higher solidity rotors have made U.S. wind power resources, 2/3 bigger, spreading competitiveness from the dark blue to the light blue and then to the orange zones to every state and to every part of Germany, which has made one, if not both, of its big transmission projects unnecessary because the best renewables far away often can no longer beat the lesser ones nearby. Yet we're often still told that only coal, gas, and nuclear stations can keep the lights on because they're 24/7, whereas wind power and PVs are variable and thus supposedly unreliable. But variable doesn't mean unpredictable. Here's how accurately the French grid operator in one stormy winter month was able to forecast a day ahead the actual output of the country's wind farms, and I'll bet they wish they could forecast demand that well. Indeed, we built the grid precisely because no generator is 24/7. They all break, and when a giant plant breaks, you lose 1 billion watts in milliseconds, often abruptly, and for weeks or months. Grids manage this intermittence by backing up failed plants with working plants, and in exactly the same way, but often at lower cost, grids can manage the forecastable variations of solar and wind power by backing up those variable renewables with a portfolio of other renewables of other kinds in other places, forecasted, integrated, diversified by type and location. So in Texas, a difficult case because it has no big hydropower and is not connected to the rest of the United States, a 2050 expected summer weeks load shape might look like this. It can get a lot smaller and less peaky with efficient use. So let's do this all with renewables. We can make 86% of the annual electricity with wind and PVs. The other 14% with dispatchable renewables. This 100% renewable supply can match the load by putting surplus electricity into two types of distributed storage, ice storage, air conditioning, and smart charging of electric cars, and then recovering that energy when needed, filling the last gaps with unobtrusively flexible demand. Now we're renewable every hour of the year with only 5% left over to be spilled, so the economics should be good. Some grid operators do this today. Of course, Germany is a well-known case. In 2014, it was not 33, but 27% of annual electric needs coming from renewables. Italy, 33, of course, more today. But 4 other European countries with modest or no hydropower were meeting about half their electricity needs from renewables, adding no bulk storage, and with superior reliability for Denmark and Germany, about 10 times ours. The former East German utility, the ultra-reliable 50 Hertz last year, got 49% of its electricity from photovoltaics and wind. So the operators have learned to run these grids the way a conductor leads a symphony orchestra. No instrument plays all the time, but the ensemble continuously creates beautiful music. So we have not just one way, bulk storage in magenta, but about 9 ways to make the grid flexible and renewable. These are sketched in order of increasing cost. These are not real numbers. Your actual costs will vary. But bulk storage comes last, not first. So we needn't wait for a storage miracle, and the market is not waiting. Instead, global electric vehicle sales are growing 60% a year. China sold more last year than the world sold in 2012, and plans 10 times more by 2020. Bloomberg expects EVs to save 2 million barrels a day of oil in the next 7 to 9 years, 12 by 2040. That's 9 times ExxonMobil's top estimate. And that was before India targeted and Germany began seriously discussing, as Rainer just said, 100% EVs by 2030. And it doesn't count 4 ways to accelerate EVs. Ultralighting, which saves up to 2/3 of the costly batteries. Feebates, which help make 1/3 of Norway's new cars electric, that is 50 times the US share, policy matters. Monetizing EVs' value as a grid resource to repay up to half their cost, and shareable autonomous or mobility as a service business models whose high asset utilization strongly advantages electric traction. So as EVs reach sticker price parity in the 2020s, their annual battery production is going to get around 1 terawatt hour a year, and that brings abundant cheap batteries, distributed solar everywhere, weaker gas prices, and many gigawatts a year of distributed storage and demand response going in. Now in 2011, our design and business book, Reinventing Fire, showed how to triple US efficiency and quintuple renewables by 2050, eliminating oil, coal, and nuclear energy, and save $5 trillion. And so far, it's about on track. But 2 weeks ago at the G20, Reinventing Fire China published its roadmap for China's energy revolution, written by the Chinese government's best energy modelers, aided by Berkeley Lab, Energy Foundation China, and Rocky Mountain Institute. It found 7x energy productivity, 12x carbon productivity feasible by 2050, cutting CO2 38%, saving $3.5 trillion, and this informed the 13th five-year plan. I estimate that extrapolating these US and Chinese findings, cross-checked with European ones, to the rest of the world, the other half, could about reach a 2 Celsius degree climate trajectory while saving about $20 trillion. Reinvesting in natural systems carbon removal could then reach about 1.5 degrees with money left over. So countries like Germany and China are confirming that climate protection is not costly but profitable, and that convenient truth should simplify the politics. Thank you.
Thanks, Amory. And I want to talk about the electric car piece of this, because we have this, as we'll be talking about a fair amount this week, we've got this really nice ramping up of electric car uptake. It's certainly forecast over the next year, as the Chevy Bolt comes out, joined perhaps by the Tesla, the Model 3, and then there's everybody else who has an EV on the way. When you add those gigawatts of rolling storage, what does that do to the equation, and what's the opportunity for the grid that comes out of that?
It's a big number and a huge opportunity for the grid if we do it right. We obviously need intelligent charging, otherwise you blow up the distribution system if everybody charges at once. And it's interesting, already in California, Emotivec is giving away the charger in your garage because they can sell the demand response resource to the grid for more money than it costs them. So you remember Dave Moskowitz had a pretty cute idea. If you're an automaker, you can offer 2 identical electric cars. One of them may be $10,000 discounted, because if you buy that one, you're allowing the automaker to aggregate and sell back to the grid all kinds of grid transactions in background that won't compromise your driving. They'll also sell more, they'll make more money than that on those transactions, and they'll also sell more cars at a discount. So there's some very interesting business models that come out of this. I should mention, though, I'd like to visit with Reiner about the numbers, because in Reinventing Fire, we found that US electricity demand, with a 2.6-fold bigger economy in 2050, could actually shrink by about 2% a year without, or 1% a year with, full use of electric vehicles by 2050, but it would still go down, not up. So it depends a lot on how efficient the cars are.
Exactly.
And now that we have the technology on the market from a tier 1 in Germany to make 2x2 meter complex carbon fiber parts in 1 minute from Diefenbacher, thing we sold them a couple of years ago, that should make the ultralighting a lot easier, and I think BMW is moving that way.
Reiner, what's the EV profile and uptake looking like for the next year or two in Germany?
Well, first of all, this election period we were very busy because we passed the necessary legislation to move the renewables to the market step by step. We have a new market design now, making sure that the market is ready to absorb growing numbers of renewables, because we want to move over completely to renewables in the next decades. We made the necessary legislation for infrastructure, that's grids, but it's also digitalization. It's very important that we set standards, that we define the privacy rules so that digitalization is accepted by the people. And of course, and this is a very important part that is going to make the entire transition cheaper, integration into the European single market, electricity market. And that means very close cooperation with our neighboring countries. Just to give you an example, last Friday we started a big project interconnecting Germany and Norway. Norway has huge hydro capacities, so it makes a lot of economic sense to combine wind and solar in Germany with hydro in Norway. So these are the big steps, and what we need to do now is to develop the strategy to decarbonize the entire economy. You know, we're talking about decarbonization not only of the power sector, of the other sectors as well. And I very much agree with Amory that there is of course, very close relationship between how successful are we going to be with efficiency and how much electricity are we going to need at the end. There is not this one figure. It's somewhere between plus 20% and plus 100%, and that depends on how efficient are we going to build our buildings in the future? How efficient is our transportation system going to be? How efficient is our power system going to be? And I am convinced the more we invest in efficiency, the easier the job is going to be.
Yeah, we've got to go in a minute, but I want to ask you both. We've got very different regulatory profiles among United States, Germany, and China.
Yeah.
And yet they're all growing in some fashion, and they're all in some ways very highly managed or not that well managed at all. I'm wondering what you see, Amory, and I'd love to hear your thoughts from across the Atlantic, what you see for the U.S. in terms of what would really take this, accelerate this in a sustained, orderly manner that we need to create the robust markets for all of these things? Or is it happening already without really much government leadership?
Well, we're already seeing it because Germany's leadership through the feed-in tariff gave the Chinese the confidence to invest in becoming the world leader in 7 kinds of renewables and take over the majority of the world market. And they got so good at it that by 2013, they added in that year more photovoltaics than the US had added since we developed the technology 59 years earlier. We all are playing catch up with China. We're all getting the China price and having to compete with the China price, so we have to stay ahead on technology and design. But I think the historians are going to record that it was Germany's leadership that got this whole thing going.
And so what's needed here now? What would it take for the U.S. market to catch up? Or is that, again, sort of an organic process where the market's going to make it happen?
Well, competition is good. Like, we've done time and motion studies to figure out how German rooftop solar installers install the same equipment at half the cost that we pay. And they're just a lot smarter about how they do it. So now we're getting that practice, and then Germany will have to get better. And this is good.
Good. Ryan, I'll give you the last word. What do you see that we can be doing here in the U.S.? What would you like to see the U.S. be doing to ramp up that piece of the energy and decarbonization world?
Well, first of all, I believe every country has different backgrounds, different resources, so you have to develop your own system. I think what is very important is to have long-term targets, because only if you have long-term targets, there's going to be investment security. And for quite a few years, people were claiming that Germany would be isolated with its energy transition. Well, now we have the Paris Agreement. And now, of course, there's also a competition between regions of this world who is going to come up with the smartest way of organizing this transformation. And predictability, I think, is the most important thing. Then, of course, we have to develop the exit strategy for the fossil fuels. I mean, the renewables are down now. They're competitive. But the more renewables and the more efficiency we're going to have, the cheaper the fossil fuels are going to be. So we need to develop strategies to get rid of the fossil fuels.
And maybe you'd agree, Rainer, that a really important thing we could both do, because we've only done it in about 20 of our states, is to reward utilities for cutting your bill, not for selling you more energy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it makes me a little worried because the last thing we have in this country is predictability in our political system. But hopefully, out of that, there will continue to be the kind of forward motion that we need and that you've led and you've inspired for so many countries. So thank you for that, and please join me in thanking Rainer Baake and Amory Lovins.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks, Amory.